The chill of Fort Benning's dawn clung to the air like a ghost that refused to leave. Inside the small interrogation room, the fluorescent light buzzed softly above Emma Callahan's bowed head. Her wrists were cuffed to the metal table, skin raw where steel had bitten too deep. She stared at her reflection in the two-way mirror, tired eyes, wind-burned skin, hair pulled back with military precision. To anyone else, she looked like a woman in trouble. To herself, she looked like a memory that never quite died. Outside, someone murmured orders. The door opened with a hiss. Colonel Grant Whitmore stepped in, his uniform immaculate, his expression composed in that deliberate way men used when they wanted to appear in control. "You've been busy, Callahan," he said, circling her like a vulture tracing thermals. 3 years of spotless service. No traffic tickets, no disciplinary records. Almost too clean. Emma didn't reply. Her breathing stayed even. 55 beats per minute, her smartwatch still tracked it faithfully, even in custody. Whitmore placed a folder on the table. Inside were photos. Her at the range, her buying groceries, her sitting alone in the base cafeteria. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "Why does a range officer use military-grade encryption? Why does she have scars that match combat injuries from Operation Sandstorm?" The name hit her like a slap. For a heartbeat, her pulse spiked, then steadied again. She remembered desert winds, the stench of diesel, the sound of her team screaming through static. But the images dissolved as quickly as they came. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said evenly. Whitmore smiled thinly. "You were always good at control, even then." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "You think I don't recognize my own work? I trained you, Emma. I made you." Her knuckles whitened. "You broke me," she whispered. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that bounced off the walls. "You broke yourself. You and those girls who thought they could change the rules. Spectre unit, wasn't it? 7 ghosts chasing glory in the sand." He reached across the table, yanked up her sleeve, and there it was, the coiled serpent devouring its own tail, encircling the number 13. His voice turned cold. "That mark was supposed to be erased with the rest of you." Emma looked up, eyes steady, voice barely above a breath. "You should have buried me deeper." The memory surged without warning: the crash, the gunfire, Bishop shouting coordinates, Maya bleeding beside her. She remembered dragging a comrade through sand that burned like fire, radio crackling with static and betrayal, a drone circling above, a call that never came, Operation Sandstorm. The mission that ended before it began. 6 women left behind in the desert because someone sold their location, because Whitmore wanted deniability. Back in the interrogation room, the sound of the buzzing light seemed to grow louder. Whitmore watched her closely, mistaking silence for surrender. "You'll sign a confession," he said. "You'll admit you faked your identity, that you stole data. It'll be easier that way." Emma exhaled slowly, almost a sigh. "Easier for who?" "For you," he said, smiling. "And for me." His hand hovered near his holster, an old habit of intimidation. She didn't flinch. "You always did underestimate what's left of a broken soldier," she murmured. Then, faintly, from somewhere down the corridor, came the echo of boots measured, purposeful. Whitmore frowned. The room's intercom crackled to life. "Sir, General Keegan's here." The colonel's confidence faltered for the briefest second. "He's not supposed to—" The door opened before he finished. A tall man stepped inside, silver-haired, calm as stone. His voice filled the room like quiet thunder. "Uncuff her!" Whitmore started to protest, but the general's gaze froze him in place. Now, the MPs obeyed. Emma's wrists were free, red lines marking where steel had been. Keegan looked at her, then at the tattoo on her arm. His jaw tightened. "That mark's real," he said softly. "You just arrested one of ours." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air. Whitmore's face drained of color. Emma flexed her hands, feeling blood rush back through her fingers. Outside, alarms began to sound, security teams scrambling, radios flaring to life. The ghosts were stirring. Whitmore backed toward the wall, voice rising. "You don't know what you're doing, Thomas. She's dangerous." Keegan didn't look at him. "The only dangerous thing in this room is the truth." Emma stood slowly, the weight of years settling on her shoulders. "Where's Bishop?" she asked. Keegan's eyes flickered. "We'll talk soon. First, you're coming with me." As they stepped into the hallway, Whitmore shouted after her, "You can't hide forever, Callahan. They'll come for you." Emma turned, meeting his rage with quiet certainty. "They already did," she said, "and I'm still here." The corridor stretched ahead, lit by red emergency lights. Each step she took felt like walking out of a grave she'd dug for herself. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the Georgia sky, echoing the war still raging inside her mind. She was done hiding. The ghosts of Sandstorm had waited long enough. Rain hammered against the windshield of the black SUV as it sped down Highway 85, the night swallowing everything except the rhythmic flash of blue lights in the rearview mirror. Emma Callahan sat in the back seat, wrists free now, but mind still shackled to the past. General Keegan rode beside her, silent, his gaze fixed on the storm outside. "You remember anything yet?" he asked finally, his voice low, cautious, like a man approaching a wounded animal. Emma hesitated. "Flashes," she said. "A convoy, sand, screaming, then nothing." Keegan nodded, as if he'd expected that. "Trauma does that. The body survives. The memory buries itself to keep you functioning." Emma looked down at her hands. There was a faint tremor in her right one, old nerve damage that never fully healed. "Or maybe someone buried it for me," she murmured. "Whitmore mentioned Operation Sandstorm," Keegan said. "Do you remember that name?" She closed her eyes. The word triggered something deep, a sudden roar of wind, a radio crackling in her ear, someone yelling coordinates through static. She saw faces, 6 women, dusty and exhausted, but alive. Then a blinding flash. When she opened her eyes again, they were passing the Fort Benning perimeter. "I remember the smell," she said quietly. "Burned rubber, diesel, and cordite. We were hit before we ever reached the extraction point." Keegan studied her profile in the dim light. "You weren't supposed to survive." "No," she replied. Neither were they. The SUV stopped outside a nondescript building near the airfield. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and gun oil. Maps covered the walls, red strings connecting locations across Syria, Afghanistan, and Yemen. Keegan gestured for her to sit. "We've been watching Whitmore for a while," he said. "He's not the only one. There's a network officers, contractors, intelligence officials, all profiting off false operations. Sandstorm was one of them." Emma felt her chest tighten. "You knew." "I suspected," Keegan admitted, "but without proof they'd have buried me too. We needed someone on the inside. Someone they'd never suspect. You." She let out a humorless laugh. "So that's what this was? A setup? You left me there to rot so I could be your bait?" "I left you alive," Keegan said evenly. "That was the only way to protect you. You think I liked signing your death report?" The words hung between them, heavy and cruel. Emma leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "They told my family I died in a vehicle explosion. My mother buried an empty coffin." Keegan's jaw clenched. "And now she'll know the truth." "No," Emma said sharply. "She can't. She deserves peace, not ghosts." The door opened. A young technician entered, tablet in hand. "Sir, you need to see this." He handed it to Keegan. On the screen, surveillance footage from the base gate showed a figure slipping through the storm drain, slender, agile, moving like a shadow. "Devons?" Keegan muttered. "She's working for Whitmore." Emma's eyes hardened. "Then she'll lead us straight to him." Keegan frowned. "You're not ready for field work." "You think I forgot how to move?" she said, rising to her feet. "I might have lost my memory, but I didn't lose my training." Keegan sighed. "You sound like her." "Who?" "Catherine Hale, your unit leader, the one who dragged you out of the wreckage before she bled out." Emma froze. The name hit her like a thunderclap. Catherine smiling through dust, shouting through the chaos, her voice returning in fragments. "If one of us gets out, make it count." Emma swallowed hard. "She said that, didn't she?" Keegan nodded. "She did." "Then I'm going to make it count." She grabbed the black tactical jacket from the chair and slid it on, the fabric stiff but familiar. Outside, the rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. She stepped into the night, the wind whipping her hair against her face. Somewhere out there, Colonel Whitmore was cleaning up loose ends. Somewhere, her sisters' names were still unspoken, their story buried under classified ink. Not for much longer. The headlights cut through the dark as she got into a Jeep, engine rumbling like distant thunder. Keegan stood in the doorway, watching her go, a shadow of pride and fear crossing his face. "She's not ready," the technician whispered. "No," Keegan said quietly, "but she's the only one who can finish this." On the open road, Emma pressed the accelerator. The reflection of her tattoo glimmered faintly in the window, 7 stars around a serpent devouring its own tail. She traced one with her fingertip and whispered the names she could remember: Catherine, Maya, Sarah. The rest still hid in the fog of her mind, waiting to be found. Lightning flashed ahead, illuminating the empty highway. Somewhere in that light, the past was waiting, and this time she wasn't going to run from it. The motel sat on the edge of Columbus, Georgia, half swallowed by kudzu in time. Neon letters flickered weakly in the rain, spelling VAC NCY. Emma parked behind the building, killed the engine, and sat there for a long moment, listening to the tick of cooling metal. Her pulse was steady. Her thoughts weren't. Somewhere between the thunder and the hum of the dashboard, the ghosts began whispering again. She closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back in the desert, the blinding sun, the radio static, the sound of someone screaming her name. Catherine's voice, rough and urgent. 7, fall back. They know we're here. Then the explosion, then silence. The memory snapped back like a rubber band, leaving her gasping. She opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The same haunted face stared back. "Focus," she muttered. She reached into her duffel and pulled out the burner phone General Keegan had given her. No signal. She didn't expect one. The network Whitmore ran would have eyes everywhere. The only way to catch him was to draw him out. A knock at the window made her hand snap to the Glock under her jacket. The face that appeared was soaked, bearded, familiar. "Easy, Callahan," said the man, lifting both hands. "You shoot me, we'll both regret it." She blinked once. "Bishop?" "Noah Bishop," he corrected, grinning just enough to look human. "You really thought I died in Syria?" "You bled out," she said flatly. "I saw it. Apparently not well enough." He opened her door and stepped back. "We need to talk." The room they took was small, stale, and smelled of cigarette smoke and disinfectant. Bishop dropped a stack of files on the bed, each folder marked classified divided by Spectre unit divided by Sandstorm. "Where'd you get these?" Emma asked. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he said, wiping rain from his face. "Let's just say Whitmore wasn't the only one selling secrets. Cross the deputy director at CIA, he was the architect. Sandstorm wasn't a mission, it was an execution." She stared at him. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Bishop slid a photo toward her. Grainy satellite imagery of their convoy, her unit circled in red. 2 hours before the ambush, Cross's private server pinged Syrian coordinates, the same ones we were given. Emma felt her throat tighten. "He gave us up. He gave them what they paid for." Bishop's tone was colder now. 6 women died, so a handful of men could keep their contracts and cover their tracks. Emma sank onto the bed, the file trembling in her hands. "Why come to me now?" "Because Whitmore's cleaning house," Bishop said. "He's scared. And when men like him get scared, they start killing everyone who knows the truth." "You're next," she gave a humorless laugh. "You sound like Keegan." "Keegan still believes in the system," Bishop said, eyes hard. "I don't. I've been out there, Emma. I've seen the files, the cover-ups, the burn notices. There are 43 of us operators declared dead who are still breathing. They call us ghosts. I call us the Forgotten." He leaned closer. "We're building something. Proof, leverage, justice, whatever you want to name it. But we need you." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one they missed," he said, "and the only one still inside their world." The air conditioner rattled like gunfire. Emma's heartbeat thudded in her ears. "You want me to spy for you?" Bishop shook his head. "I want you to finish what they started. Keegan's loyal, but he plays by rules that no longer exist. Cross doesn't fear rules. He fears exposure. And you, Spectre 7, you're his unfinished business." Emma looked at the photo again. The 7 figures in desert gear, 6 faces she could name, the 7th hers blurred by smoke. "You think I'm ready to face them?" she whispered. Bishop smiled faintly. "You don't get ready for ghosts, Callahan. You just stop running from them." He reached into his coat and handed her a small metal drive. "Everything you need is here. Names, accounts, movements. But be careful. Once you open it, there's no going back." She turned it over in her hand. Such a small thing to hold so much truth. "What happens after this?" she asked. Bishop met her eyes. Then we bring them down, all of them. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, low and distant like the sound of artillery. Emma stood and walked to the window. The reflection of the rain streaked down the glass like tears she no longer had. 43 ghosts, she said quietly. Then let's make them visible again. Bishop nodded once. Welcome back, Seven. The safe house Bishop led her to looked like nothing more than a shuttered ranger station at the edge of Chattahoochee National Forest. Pines closed in on all sides, their needles whispering in the cold night wind. From the outside it was darkness and decay. But Emma's trained eye saw the tells. The way the gravel had been recently raked, the faint glint of a hidden camera lens, the muted hum of a generator underground. She followed Bishop up the steps, her boots making no sound, her senses cataloging every exit, every angle. Inside, the smell of damp wood gave way to electronics. Banks of servers lined one wall, antennas disguised as coat racks. 3 figures waited in the dim light. They didn't need to introduce themselves. Their posture, their eyes, the way they positioned themselves in the room spoke of the same schooling, the same betrayal. Bishop gestured. Daniels, Delta Force, ambush in Somalia. Chen, Naval Intelligence, her whole team wiped out in the Philippines. Rodriguez, Air Force Special Operations, only survivor of a helicopter accident in Yemen. Each gave Emma a curt nod, recognizing something in her that matched the fracture in themselves. We've all lost everything, Chen said. Families think we're dead. Friends mourned us. We gave up our lives for our country, and our country tried to erase us in return. Emma met their eyes one by one. You're not dead, she said quietly. You're here, waiting. Waiting for someone to make them listen. Daniels corrected. Bishop crossed his arms. That's where you come in. Keegan trusts you. The families saw you at the ceremony. You have credibility. You can open doors we can't. Emma felt the weight of the thumb drive in her pocket like a stone. And if I don't? Then we keep doing what we've been doing, Bishop said. Building cases, waiting for justice that never comes, and eventually, he let the sentence hang. Eventually, patience runs out. Rodriguez finished, his voice low and dangerous. Emma took a slow breath. If you want me to help, it has to be legal. No revenge killings, no vigilante justice. We're better than them. Are we? Chen asked bitterly. They sent us to die for profit and politics. Why should we care about laws that didn't protect us? Emma turned toward her, the serpent tattoo on her arm catching the light. Because the moment we become them, they win. They turned us into ghosts. Let's not become monsters. Silence stretched. Bishop's expression softened. I hoped you'd say that. He picked up a remote and brought a wall screen to life. Bank transfers, encrypted emails, recorded calls filled the display. 5 years of evidence. Cross thought he was scrubbing the record. All he was doing was creating witnesses. Emma studied the screen. Names, dates, amounts. Meetings in Dubai, Zurich, and D.C. Cross's signature popping up again and again. It was bigger than she'd imagined. Layers of corruption running through agencies like rot. We have an asset inside Cross's security detail, Bishop said. Another survivor. She can get you in. The meeting's in 6 days. You get him on record. We stream it live to oversight committees. If he doesn't talk, Phase 3, Rodriguez murmured. Bishop shot him a warning look. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, hearing Catherine's voice again. If one of us gets out, make it count. She opened them. Give me 48 hours to verify everything. If it checks out, I'll help. But we do it officially. By the book. Bishop nodded. That's why you're the key. He held out his hand. After a moment, she shook it. His palm was calloused, steady. Welcome back, Seven, he said softly. She didn't smile. She only thought of the 7 stars on her arm and the empty space where an 8th might go. Outside, the forest shifted in the wind. Somewhere far off, a train horn moaned, a lonely sound cutting through the trees. In that sound, she heard her own resolve solidify. They had taken her unit, her life, her name. Now she would take back the truth. The ghosts were done hiding. Emma returned to Fort Benning under a sky washed thin with late autumn rain, the drive home feeling less like a return and more like stepping into the center of a slow-moving storm. General Keegan had arranged a secure room at the Joint Operations Center where Emma and Ethan Park could work through Bishop's cash under classified supervision, and when she walked into that cold-lit space, the hum of servers and the soft tap of keyboards felt like ritual, a kind of prayer the living offered to the dead. So she sank into the chair and let the team lay out the evidence, like bones on a table, satellite pings lining up with bank ledgers, shell companies that paid for logistics in the region, travel itineraries that synchronized with the convoy routes on the night of Sandstorm. With each line of corroboration, Emma could feel something inside her settle into place, a terrible fit of puzzle pieces that explained why the world had taken her sisters and left her a ghost. And Park, who had become a friend she reluctantly trusted, moved with the careful curiosity of someone who had spent his life unmasking masks, and under his fingers encrypted containers unlocked and spilled whispered conversations, emails with euphemistic subject lines, and a ledger that carried the unmistakable signature of Nathan Cross, the man whose face had been a name in a file and suddenly was the center of a map of rot. So Keegan watched quietly from the corner, his face a map of lines he would not yet speak aloud, while Colonel Whitmore, still cuffed under military arrest in a nearby wing, seethed in silence at having misjudged the tide. Emma watched Park isolate one thread after another, phone numbers that connected to private security firms, payment streams running from shell accounts to contractors, and an intercepted voice clip in which Cross laughed about preserving plausible deniability by reducing a team to a casualty report. And when she heard that clipped, familiar tone, her body reacted before her mind, did memories arrived like merciless waves, small shards of faces and hands, and the mule breathing of engines in desert sand, and she found herself whispering the names she had kept on the inside of her skull like a rosary: Catherine, Maya, Sarah, Jessica, Diana, Ashley, the names returning to her with terrible clarity and weight. They were not just words now, they were reasons. Keegan had set conditions: no freelance justice, no leaks, a task force that would walk the thin line between military discipline and legal accountability, and Emma agreed because Bishop's drive and Park's cross-verifications told a story that could not be ignored. But she also insisted on one condition of her own: she would go to Dubai only with a sanctioned sting, recorded and legal, and no one would be sacrificed to make headlines or satisfy vendettas, because she had seen how vendettas ate people whole. So they built the plan like a meticulous clock. Phase 1, to get Emma into the meeting under the cover of a credible security consultant with papers prepared by a military legal team. Phase 2, to ensure live recording of any admissions and to force Cross into a corner with documents and witnesses. And Phase 3, as a last resort, involved triggering sealed warrants and a coordinated international arrest if necessary. And while the lawyers argued phrasing and rules, Park and Bishop's network worked the edges, lining up an inside asset on Cross's security detail, planting listening devices in plausible places, and mapping escape routes from the penthouse where the meeting would be held. Meanwhile, Emma took time to do what felt like both preparation and penance. She ran through physical drills at the old range where she had once moved as second nature. But this time her movements were slower and more deliberate. Each breath counted to anchor memories that threatened to wash her away. Samuel Torres, first in the trenches of support, had left a battered leather folder with her at Miguel's old shed. A folder of small things, handwritten notes from families whose daughters had been told the official stories and who had buried them with lies. Emma read every one of those notes in the quiet hour before dawn, feeling the rawness of grief as a fuel she had no right to squander. As the days ticked down, Whitmore's custodian status under confinement revealed new pieces of truth: forensic traces of improper chain of custody on ammunition logs, official messages backdated to cover meetings in Vienna and Dubai, petty cruelties that now read like clues to greed, and Captain Marla Devons, the officer who had once mocked Emma on the line, was quietly placed on interdiction as evidence of her involvement surfaced, making the base hum with a low and dangerous satisfaction. Revenge, though, was not the goal. Accountability was. Yet even in the procedural grind there was theater. The families of the fallen demanded public acknowledgement, and Keegan insisted on a ceremony to give faces to names finally acknowledged, because the living deserved truth before they moved on. And Emma attended that ceremony with a ribbon pinned coldly to her chest, and a hollow that only closed a fraction when she met Mother's, whose eyes said both thank you and why so late, and afterward she slipped away to stand with Park in an operations van where the glow of monitors painted their faces, and they watched footage of Cross's movements. The man who had risen through the bureaucracy on charm and a talent for making uncomfortable problems vanish, completely unaware that the trap was being laid in a manner both surgical and public. She felt the strange irony of returning to a place she had tried to bury, preparing to drag its rot into daylight, and with Bishop's ghosts chanting their own quiet counsel around her, some ready for blood, others clinging to the hope of a lawful remedy. Emma sat down to write the statements that would be read into evidence, each sentence an invocation of the lives taken and the promise she owed them, and when the night before departure came, Keegan handed her a small metal tube containing the chain of custody for the drive, the legal imprimatur that meant if Cross moved, he would be stopped, and Park, who had been quiet for hours, finally looked up and said simply, "You will not be alone." She breathed in that promise and pressed her palm to the tattoo on her arm, imagining the 8th star she would add not for glory, but for hope. And as the plane lifted the next dawn toward Dubai, Emma felt the old armor of detachment settling around her, but inside she carried names, evidence, and a resolve honed by loss, a resolve that would not allow their story to be erased again. Dubai shimmered like a mirage when the plane descended through the pale dawn. From above, it looked unreal, glass towers rising out of gold dust, roads twisting like ribbons through the desert, and the sea reflecting a sky that hadn't yet decided on its color. For Emma Callahan, it was both beautiful and suffocating. Beneath that shine, she knew, men like Nathan Cross built their empires on silence. The moment her boots touched the marble floor of the terminal, she switched masks, shoulders squared, expression calm, posture of a professional who belonged in the world of private contracts and discreet operations. The passport she carried bore the name Lena Cole, security consultant, Atlanta. The papers were real enough to pass inspection. Keegan's legal team had ensured that. But inside her chest, the rhythm of her heart was the only sound that mattered, slow, deliberate, counting down to justice. Her hotel suite overlooked the Burj Al Arab, a curved sail of light on the horizon. The place smelled of orchids and money. She unpacked with soldiers' efficiency recording devices disguised as pens, encrypted drives hidden in the lining of her bag, a compact body camera she had modified herself. On the bedside table lay a photograph that hadn't been there when she packed. 7 women in tactical gear, dust-streaked and smiling in the Syrian Sunday. Someone had written across the bottom in Bishop's handwriting, "They're watching. Make them proud." She let the picture rest against the lamp and sat for a long time in silence. The meeting was scheduled for that evening, 4 hours earlier than expected. Cross had changed the time, either coincidence or strategy. She dressed in neutral tones, her hair tied back, her sidearm replaced by the small weight of a recording transmitter beneath her jacket. At precisely 6 o'clock, a black sedan arrived. The driver, a woman with cropped dark hair, gave a single nod. "You're late," she said. "Traffic," Emma replied. Their eyes met for half a second, long enough for Emma to recognize the discipline in her movements. This was Bishop's inside asset, the survivor from Cross's team. No introductions were needed. The car glided through the neon evening. Skyscrapers shimmered, fountains erupted like clockwork, and Emma thought of how human ambition always tried to outbuild the desert it stood on. "Cross doesn't know you're coming?" the driver asked. "He thinks I'm representing Keegan," Emma said. "Official inspection, nothing more." "He'll suspect," the woman warned. "He suspects everyone." "Then he's already half beaten," Emma answered. They pulled up to the private entrance of the Burj Al Arab. The elevator climbed in silence, the air thick with perfume and tension. When the doors opened, 2 men in tailored suits frisked her with polite professionalism. No weapons detected. She was shown into the penthouse suite. Nathan Cross stood at the far window, city lights reflecting in his glass of whiskey. He turned with the easy confidence of a man who had forgotten fear. "Miss Cole," he greeted, smiling. "Or should I say, Miss Callahan?" The use of her real name froze the air between them. He gestured for her to sit. "Relax. I don't bite. Not anymore." Emma stayed standing. "Then why the security theater?" "Because I like control," Cross said lightly. You, of all people, should appreciate that. I heard about your little resurrection. Fort Benning, the range incident, the general's heroics, fascinating story. You should sell the rights." She didn't respond. He poured another drink and handed it to her. She didn't take it. "Still don't trust anyone," he mused. "That's what made you perfect for Sandstorm." "You sent us there to die," she said. "You made it look like an op." He chuckled softly. "Oh, Emma, you think the world runs on ideals? It runs on necessity. People like you, like me, we're expendable parts that keep the larger machine turning." She took a step closer. "And what happens when the parts start fighting back?" His smile faltered for the first time. "Then they get recycled." She moved faster than he could react. In one motion, she pressed the recording pen to his lapel, the hidden mic already transmitting to the surveillance van below. "You're being recorded, Director," she said. "Every word." Cross's expression shifted from surprise to amusement. "Do you think I didn't expect this? You're not the first to try. Bishop, for instance, poor idealist. He thought exposure would change things. You know where that got him? Alive," she said, "and waiting." For a heartbeat, something like fear flickered behind his eyes. He reached into his jacket pocket. She moved first, twisting his wrist and forcing him back against the window. The object he dropped wasn't a gun, it was a signal jammer, blinking red. "Backup won't hear you now," he said through clenched teeth. "You'll disappear here, quietly, and no one will care." "You always did underestimate women in uniform," she said, and pressed the emergency transponder Keegan had given her. A faint vibration pulsed under her palm. 90 seconds. "You can't stop what's coming," Cross hissed. "There are files you don't even know exist. Requiem, Aurora, Helios projects that make Sandstorm look like a training exercise." "Then you'll tell me everything," she said. On record, the sound of helicopter blades cut through the night. SEAL operatives in tactical black descended onto the balcony, glass shattering inward. Cross tried to lunge for his device, but Emma was faster. She kicked it across the marble floor and snapped a restraint cuff around his wrist. "Nathan Cross," she said, voice steady, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and treason." He looked up at her, sweat beading his forehead. "You think this changes anything?" "No," she said softly, "but it starts something." Keegan's voice crackled over her earpiece. "We have you on visual, Seven. Good work." She stood amid the wreckage, the city lights painting her in shards of gold and shadow. The ghosts were watching. Somewhere behind her, Bishop's network was already moving. As the SEALs led Cross away, she glanced out over Dubai, the towers, the desert, the sea beyond, and whispered, "For them." In her mind, she saw 7 faces smiling in the sun, and for the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. The news broke across Washington before the sun did. Deputy Director Nathan Cross arrested in Dubai under U.S. jurisdiction. The networks called it a stunning betrayal, the intelligence community called it damage control, and Emma Callahan called it justice. She sat in a quiet conference room at the Pentagon, the blinds drawn, the sound of distant rain tapping against glass. It had been 48 hours since the operation. Her body was bruised, her voice hoarse from the interrogations that followed, but her mind was clear. Across from her, General Keegan read through the final report with the weight of a man who'd been fighting shadows too long. "You realize what this means," he said finally. "You didn't just expose one man. You lit up a network that's been feeding off this country for a decade. Then we clean it up," she said simply, piece by piece. He smiled, weary but proud. "You sound like Catherine." The mention of her old commander stirred something warm and sharp in her chest. "She'd probably tell me I'm late." "Maybe," Keegan said. "But she'd also tell you that you did it right." A knock on the door interrupted them. Ethan Park stepped in, holding a tablet. "The data Bishop's team sent from Europe, it's real." Cross wasn't exaggerating. "There are other programs. Requiem, Aurora, Helios, black projects running out of civilian shells. He wasn't the top." Emma's stomach sank. "Then someone else is pulling the strings." "Several someones," Park said. "We traced funding back to private defense firms, even a few senators. It's deep." Keegan closed the folder and leaned back. "Then we keep going, quietly. If we shout, they'll erase everything again. But if we move carefully, we can rebuild trust. For once, we fight in daylight." Emma nodded, but her gaze drifted to the window, to the reflection of the tattoo on her forearm, the serpent, the 7 stars, and now, freshly inked, an 8th. Hope. She touched it lightly, feeling the sting of the new wound. "What about Bishop?" she asked. Park hesitated. "He vanished after the raid. Left Dubai before we secured Cross. We found his tracker near the airfield, destroyed. But we intercepted a message from his frequency an hour ago. 3 words. Project Requiem confirmed." Keegan frowned. "He's still hunting. He's doing what he always does," Emma said. "Staying in the dark so we can stand in the light." She rose from her chair, gathering the file copies. "I'll brief the families personally. They deserve to hear from someone who was there." Keegan stood too. "They already know, Emma." They saw the broadcast. For the first time, the world said your unit's name out loud. Her throat tightened. "Spectre 13, she whispered. "They're not ghosts anymore." He extended his hand. She shook it, firm and steady. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Rest?" She gave a small smile. "That's never been my specialty." He laughed softly. "No, I didn't think so." As she stepped out into the hallway, the hum of the Pentagon surrounded her, a labyrinth of secrets and fluorescent light. But something in the air felt lighter now, as if truth itself had found a way to breathe again. She walked past rows of framed photographs of fallen soldiers. At the end of the corridor hung one more frame, empty, waiting. Someone had left a plaque beneath it. "To the specters who fought in silence so others could speak." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky over D.C. was streaked with pale gold, the city waking to a world that felt slightly cleaner, slightly less haunted. Park caught up to her near the exit. "You sure you don't want an escort?" he asked. "You're still on half a dozen hit lists." She looked at him with a hint of humor. "Only half a dozen? I'm slipping." He grinned, shaking his head. "Take care, 7. You too, kid." She stepped out onto the steps, the breeze cool against her face. Across the street, a black SUV idled at the curb. The driver's window rolled down just enough for a hand to emerge, gloved, familiar, and tap once against the door. Her pulse quickened. She didn't need to see the face to know. Bishop. The vehicle pulled away before she could move, melting into traffic. But as it turned the corner, she caught a glimpse of a small sticker on the bumper. A silver hawk, wings spread wide, the old Spectre insignia. She smiled faintly. "Still watching," she whispered. Somewhere deep inside the Pentagon, alarms of a different kind would soon start to sound. New files, new names, new ghosts rising from the shadows. But for this one fleeting morning, Emma allowed herself a breath of peace. She looked toward the horizon where sunlight broke through the clouds and murmured to the memory of her sisters, "We brought it home." Then she walked down the steps into the waking city, carrying the past in her scars and the future in that 8th star, hope glinting softly beneath her sleeve. Night settled over Arlington like a velvet shroud, the kind of silence that holds both endings and beginnings. Emma Callahan stood alone in Section 60 of the cemetery, where white headstones stretched in perfect rows under the moonlight. The air smelled faintly of rain and cut grass. In her hand, she held a small metal badge, tarnished, scratched, the last remnant of Spectre Unit 13, the one Catherine Hale had pinned to her vest before that final mission. She knelt and placed it at the base of a headstone that read Captain Catherine Hale, U.S. Army, Operation Sandstorm. For years, the record had called her missing in action. Tonight, that had changed to killed in service. It wasn't justice, not really, but it was truth, and truth was a kind of peace. "We made it, boss," Emma whispered. "Took us a while, but we did it." A soft crunch of gravel behind her made her turn. General Keegan approached, his long coat pulled tight against the wind. He stopped a few feet away, nodding toward the rows of names. "They deserved more than a line in a file," he said. "Now they have their own place." "They should have had it years ago," she replied. "But late truth is better than none." Keegan looked at her carefully. "You could come back, you know, not full duty. Training command. The younger ones need someone who's seen both sides." Emma smiled faintly. "The ghosts don't belong in classrooms, General. We belong where silence starts to hurt." He studied her for a long moment, then reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. "Bishop sent this. Arrived through back channels. No return address." Inside was a photo granny, taken in some nameless foreign city. A table, a laptop, and on the screen a project header stamped Requiem Initiative divided by Active. Underneath, a single handwritten line. Not done yet. B. Keegan exhaled slowly. He's still out there. He always will be, Emma said. He's the part of us that doesn't rest. She looked back at the graves. And maybe that's how it has to be. The general placed a hand on her shoulder. You've earned peace, Emma. Don't chase ghosts forever. She didn't answer. Instead, she watched the wind ripple through the flags lining the rows, each one catching the faint light from the path lamps. In that moment, she could almost see them. Catherine, Maya, Sarah, Jessica, Diana, Ashley walking beside her, laughing softly, alive again in memory. For the first time, the sight didn't hurt. It felt like coming home. You ever think about what freedom really means, General? She asked quietly. He raised an eyebrow. Every day. It's not medals or orders, she said. It's standing up even when you're shaking. It's choosing truth when lies are easier. That's what they died for. That's what we live for. Keegan nodded. And that's why people like you scare the ones in power. She smiled, not proudly, just knowingly. Then I'm doing something right. A car horn sounded faintly from the distant road. The world was waking beyond these gates, unaware that in the stillness here, history had just turned a page. Emma adjusted her jacket, the sleeve sliding back to reveal the serpent tattoo, its tail now circling 8 stars, the newest one still healing. Hope. She traced it once with her thumb, then turned toward the city lights across the Potomac. Good night, girls, she whispered. You can rest now. Keegan watched as she walked toward the gate, her figure fading into the fog. When she reached the road, a black SUV rolled to a stop beside her. The window lowered just enough for a familiar voice to drift out. You ready for one more trip, Seven? Bishop's tone was calm, steady, the same as it had been in every firefight they'd shared. She didn't hesitate. Where? Eastern Europe. Something's moving under the Requiem banner. Then let's finish it. She climbed in, the door closing with a soft thud that echoed like a heartbeat. As the SUV disappeared down the tree-lined road, the cemetery returned to silence. The camera would have lingered on Catherine's headstone, the wind stirring the badge Emma had left there, glinting once before the night swallowed it whole. Somewhere beyond the city, thunder rolled a promise, not a threat, and in that sound lived the truth of every soldier who ever fought for more than orders. The ghosts of Spectre Unit 13 were no longer lost. They were legend. Dawn crept over the Atlantic like a secret too heavy to keep. The black SUV rolled to a stop on a fog-slick runway at Andrews Air Force Base, engines rumbling low. Bishop stepped out first, the rising light cutting sharp edges across his face. He looked older now, eyes ringed with exhaustion, beard flecked with gray, but his movements were still exact, disciplined, dangerous. Emma followed, her boots clicking softly on the wet tarmac. She squinted toward the horizon where the first sliver of sun split the clouds. It's been a long night, she said. It's been a long 5 years, Bishop corrected. Requiem isn't just another cover project. It's a machine built to erase evidence, people, entire truths. Cross was one operator. There are others. Names? 2 for sure, he said, handing her a thin dossier sealed with wax. One civilian contractor running logistics out of Warsaw. The other an active intelligence officer working stateside. High clearance, clean record, dangerous. She flipped the folder open just long enough to see a photo before Bishop shut it again. Not here, he warned. Too many ears. A plane idled nearby, its fuselage unmarked except for a tailcode she didn't recognize. He nodded toward it. Keegan authorized the flight. Warsaw first. We start there. Emma studied him, searching for the man she remembered under the scars of exile. You could have stayed gone, she said. No one would have blamed you. And let them win? His eyes were steady. You taught me better than that. She almost smiled. You sure this isn't about revenge? At first it was, he admitted. Now it's about legacy. The world forgets too easily. Somebody has to remind it. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of jet fuel and rain. Emma glanced back toward the control tower, where the American flag hung limp in the mist. For a heartbeat she thought of Keegan, of Park, of the mothers who had cried over empty coffins. Then she looked at Bishop and said, We don't come back until it's finished. Agreed. They boarded the plane. Inside, the cabin lights were dim, the seats stripped down to bare functionality. Bishop spread a map across a metal table, dotted with red pins tracing an arc from the Balkans to the Baltic. Requiem's roots start here, he said, tapping the map near Bucharest. Small cells, private fronts, mercenaries turned data brokers. It's what Sandstorm evolved into after they buried us. They took our playbook and made it permanent. Emma leaned over the map. Then we take it apart the same way we built it quietly. Quiet doesn't mean easy, he said. This time we're not ghosts, we're witnesses. The engines roared to life, shaking the table. She buckled in, staring out the window as the world tilted. Washington fell away beneath them, its lights fading into the haze. Somewhere down there, the ghosts of Spectre Unit 13 were finally at rest. Somewhere ahead, the ones who had replaced them were still writing lies into history. The seatbelt sign flicked off. Bishop poured 2 coffees from a battered thermos and handed her one. "You ever think about what happens after all this?" he asked. "After Requiem?" She shrugged. "Maybe I'll plant something, build instead of destroy. Or maybe I'll just drive until the road runs out." "You'd last a week," he said, smiling. "Probably," she admitted. He looked out the window. "You know, I still hear their voices sometimes, the ones we lost." "Me too," she said. "But I think that's the point. We carry them so they don't fade." The radio crackled softly with air traffic chatter, a rhythm that reminded her of distant battle comms. She rested her head against the seat and let the drone of the engines drown out the rest of the world. Outside, dawn brightened into day, the ocean below glinting like hammered glass. The hunt had begun again, but this time not in anger, not in secrecy. This time it was for memory, for those who had vanished beneath bureaucratic ink. Somewhere above the clouds, between silence and resolve, Emma Callahan, the last specter, closed her eyes and whispered into the roar of the engines, "For truth. For them, always." The camera would have pulled back then, 2 figures framed against the rising sun, flying east into the light, while the faint echo of a heartbeat pulsed through the soundtrack, like a promise that the story was not over. Fade to black. Tagline: "The ghosts were never gone. They were waiting." Dawn rose over the Atlantic, slow and golden, brushing light across the silver skin of the transport plane cutting east. Inside, the world was quiet, just the hum of engines and the low murmur of 2 people who had seen too much to ever sleep easy again. Emma Callahan sat by the window, watching clouds drift beneath her like ghosts that never learned to rest. Beside her, Bishop traced coordinates across a worn map, lines of red ink that connected places where truth had been buried. "You ever think this ends?" Emma asked softly, eyes still on the horizon. Bishop didn't look up. "Endings are for people who give up. We just keep moving." She smiled faintly. "We carry them, don't we? The ones who didn't make it." He finally met her gaze. "No, Callahan. We are the ghosts. We're what's left when silence refuses to win." The sunlight reached her sleeve, glinting off the tattoo that curled around her arm, an Ouroboros circling 8 stars. The newest one still raw, hope. She touched it gently, feeling the pulse beneath. "They'd want us to keep going," she whispered. Bishop nodded toward the window. "They'd want us to be seen." Outside, the sky flared brighter, the kind of light that doesn't ask permission to break through. Emma powered on her encrypted tablet and began typing the first line of a new report. "Operation Requiem initiated. Truth in motion." Then she paused, stared at the blinking cursor, and closed the file. "Do you ever wonder," Bishop asked, "if anyone will really know what happened?" Emma looked back at him, calm and certain. "They don't need the whole story, just the reminder that courage doesn't die quietly." He exhaled, a sound between relief and fatigue. "So what now?" "Now," she said, buckling her vest and standing, "we keep hope alive. We keep the signal burning." Smirked. Still the same soldier never done fighting. "Someone has to fight for the truth," she said. The plane banked slightly, its shadow stretching across the brightening sea. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Emma's voice, softer now, broke it, as though speaking not to Bishop but to everyone listening somewhere out there. "Some stories aren't told for fame or headlines. They're told because someone, somewhere, needs to believe again in justice, in courage, in the kind of quiet strength that outlives fear." If this story reached you, if you felt something in the fire behind it, keep it alive, share it forward. Because when one voice speaks, others find the strength to follow. She turned, looking straight into the invisible camera of the story itself, her expression steady, hopeful. Thank you for walking this road with us. If you believe that truth still matters, stay with the mission, like, share, and subscribe. Not for the numbers, but to keep these stories breathing. The next chapter begins where this one ends. Outside, the light poured over the clouds like redemption. The plane climbed higher, its silhouette dissolving into the sunrise. And in that final glow, her voice lingered quiet, resolute, eternal. The ghosts were never gone. They were waiting, and now, because of you, they can finally be seen.